I'm going to find it because I want to go, but the land too far. I want to go, and I'm begging Jah over yonder, where there's many, many moons yonder. I want to go back to Africa. The reason why I wrote that song is when I thought of my great-grandmother that came from Guinea, Africa, were being kidnapped against her will, bought and being sold against her will, crossed the Atlantic Ocean against her will, landed at Mountain Bay in Tobago against her will, work on Grafton Estate against her will, being beaten, being raped against her will. One day, I could when she died, I was 6 years of age, and I could remember her very well. She was a very tall, thin lady with long ears. She came from the Ibu tribe from Guinea, Africa. And in her last days, every evening, she used to stoop down and she used to smoke that charcoal pipe, the tobacco. And she used to watch the sea area of Mount Irving. And one evening she said, "Ow, me pick me, no man know the burial ground." Which means to say, my child, no one knows the place that they will be buried after they die. Knowing that she came from so far and had to die in a country that she did not belong. And I wrote that calypso in the honor of my great-grandmother, Martha Paul. And remember, the Paul was a slave title. But she was an Ibuan. And that would give me that power to be so strong spiritually. Spiritually, I'm very strong. It gives me the will to live and the will to speak about the criminal elements and the criminal intentions against these slaves. Oh, me mama, me papa, listen to the voice of your daughter. Me want come home back to Africa. Me want be with me grandfather. Eh, lelu, lelu, futu, lelu. Lelu, lelu, futu, lelu. Nawata wanga, nangata boso. Lelu, lelu, futu, lelu. And as you know, Miriam Makeba and I have performed many times before. And thinking of Miriam Makeba, I brought in Miriam Makeba also in the calypso, in that calypso vein. Faitan, Miguru ba.
Hostess, and my name is Linda MacArthur Monica, Sandy, Louis, Calypso Rose. And I came from Tobago. We are going to Jamaica right now. Give you some blues. Sitting by the ocean, the way she feels so sad. Sitting by the ocean, the way she feels so sad. She ain't got no money to take you back to Trinidad. Fine Calypso woman, you cooking shrimp and rice. Fine Calypso woman, she cooking shrimp and rice. Those jockey hot dogs, oh, treat his stomach very nice. In Trinidad, $1 buy papaya juice, banana pie, 6 coconuts, a field, and plenty fish to full the boat. A bush of bread, a bottle of wine, and all because she come to find oh yeah. If she heard from nectar, if she heard from juice, the pocket full of empty, he's got the Calypso blues. This jockey girls give him a scare, his blacky roots and brandy hair, his eyeless falls, her name is Pink, and perhaps not the girl she ain't. She take a bob when she should waltz. I even think her name was false. Calypso girl is good a lot. Is what you see is what you got. Oh.
queen of music in the Caribbean, Calypso Rose, still going strong, still going strong. I want to go back to Africa. I want to go back to Africa. Carry me back. I'm in my country. Carry me back home. I want to go back to see my great grandmother. Carry me back in my country. Carry me back home. When me come, me not come with belly. No, me go with belly. Africa, I want to come back home. Africa, I say a tired room. Just give me the plain passage because I go home back. Go back to Africa to see my great grandmother. Africa on the mind, Africa deep in our identity. Africa shall never die. Africa, Africa. Tomorrow morning, we are going. Tomorrow morning, we are going. Go back to Africa. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. Another evening, another night of watch, another day has come. Will never die, shall never die. She may wane, she may be sidestepped from time to time, but she will never die. Oh, picnic, bush gâtés, we say, Yangadona, you better clear the way, let she pass. And when you see Yangadona with your red, green, and gold, you better clear the way, let she pass. Going back to Africa. As part of the Back to Africa movement, the Back to Africa movement, gaining steam with the movement of Marcus Messiah Garvey, whose name I've had to invoke so many times these past few days. The Black Moses, the Black Moses. Good evening, another day. Today I spent part of the day with children. This year's emancipation, to spend time with little children. I spent a couple of hours today with a group here in Buxton, little children. A group that is called All God's Little Children. And I went to speak to them about emancipation. They meet in a building where I went to school, Buxton Secondary School. The building no longer houses a school, but a villager, Mr. Wagan Gardner, he is toiled to refurbish the building, and the club, the children's club, meets there. And I hadn't gone into that building in decades since they'd removed the school from there. And today when I went in there, I jumped because the children were meeting in a corner of the building where I sat as a student more than 50 years ago. The class was 4 Science, 4S. And our class was in the very corner. It's now a little room. In those days, we didn't have rooms. There was an open building and separated by blackboards. I think today you all call it chalkboard. It brought back memories flooded. And the person who was helping to teach the little children was one of my teachers at that very school. Taught me English language and literature. And I was able to talk to those little children about emancipation, the story of emancipation, the story of the Middle Passage, the story of enslavement, the story of overcoming enslavement, the story of the village movement. The story of humanization of the coast. It's a story that should empower a people, empower them to stand tall and to stand strong and to demand their rightful place. It's a story of sadness, a story of joy, a story of triumph. This emancipation, like every emancipation, must remind us of that story and propel us to live out that story. The village, the village, the village. I hear so often people say, our foreparents bought villages. No, they didn't buy villages. To say they buy villages is to say that villages were there before and they buy them. Oh no, they bought land and they created villages. I have to be very careful, because young people today are digging back into our history and sometimes they make mistakes because they are not using the right tools to examine our history. So often we hear people talk about the slaves coming from Africa. No, slaves did not come from Africa. People came from Africa. And they were enslaved against their will. They were enslaved against their will. In the same way, our foreparents didn't buy villages. They bought land. They bought land with cash money. And then they created villages. And in the process of creating, what they were doing was that they were turning the wild coast into a civilized coast, making their mark on their own civilization. We are more than just a race of people. We are a civilization that has expanded to include other ethnic groups that later came, and groups that were here before us, or Amerindian brothers and sisters. So we were never slaves. We were enslaved against our will. We fought against slavery and we defeated slavery. We then bought land and created villages that together became civilization. Oh, what a great people. I may have caused in church a couple of days ago, when I referred to the intellect of those who were able to buy land and create villages and expanded civilization. And I refer to them as people of intellect, not academics. And one of the reverends picked up on it. The distinction between academics and intellectuals. Our foreparents were intellectuals. They couldn't read and write. They could not read and write, most of them. But they preached the gospel, they preached the scriptures. How they did it? It was because although they did not possess academic qualifications, they possess intellect. Professor Nettleford calls it the creative intellect linked with the creative imagination. They could imagine 2026. I told those little children, that their foreparents imagined them, and that is why they created schools. I told them that once upon a time in a place called Buxton, you had to try hard to be a dunce. You couldn't be a dunce easily. 3 high schools, 3 secondary schools, 4 primary schools, about 10 kindergarten schools. You couldn't be a dunce easily in a place like that. Education was all over you. Our foreparents had the intellect to prepare that for us. When Martin Carter said, I come from the nigger yard of yesterday, that's the nigger yard that we came from, a nigger yard of education. One of the parents and leaders of the club there, a young lady that I taught at Lessons Place here in Buxton decades ago, she came up to me and she said, Dr. Hines, I said, yes. I said, how are the children? She said, well, they all grow up now. She said, one is an engineer, one is a teacher, one works at the GRA, and the last one just finished her law thing at UG, and she's about to go to Trinidad. She said, what you and your brother George and Brother Kwayana instilled in me, the value of education, I pass it on to my children. And they made me proud. Last night I said I was bored. Those stories that lifts us and spurs us on to tomorrow. Emancipation is also about education. And there have been so many people, some of them Africans, have told Africans that they must abandon education. They must abandon education and they must go and learn trade and they must go and get into business and so on. Why can't you get into business and also seek education? Why can't you learn a trade, but also learn to read and write and spell? Why it has to be one or the other? Hold on to education, because emancipation is also about education. Most of those men and women who bought land and created villages, they couldn't read and write. But one of the first things they did was to create schools. They weren't creating the schools for themselves, they were creating the schools for us. For us. I reminded Teacher Finella today that in Form 2, 11 years, 12 years, the most? I think so, 12 years. I think 13 years, most of us were. And she used to have us read these short stories in a book called The Sun's Eye, a collection of Caribbean short stories. And that's when we were introduced to the Caribbean. As little 11, 12-year-old, we became aware of something called the Caribbean. And she used to have us not only read those short stories, but we had to then write skits out of those short stories. 11 years old, 12 years old. And when we were finished writing the skits, we had to act. That's where Henry Rodney came from. We were classmates, and you could hear even then at 11, 12 years old, you could know that Henry Rodney was going to go on to become a great creative worker, creative intellect. Yes, at 11, 12-year-old, we were reading stories, short stories, understanding them, what they mean, what Miguel Street meant, and we were reading Samuel Salvon, and we were reading Edgar Methalls, and Martin Carter, This Is the Dark Time I Love. I remember those words to this day. You may have heard me from time to time recite them, as you would say, on this book. I first learned them as an 11, 12-year-old kid in my literature class. And then we had to turn those things into skit. And I asked Teacher Finella, don't you think you were a little bit unfair to us? Asking us to read short stories at 11, 12 years old, understand them, and then write little plays, and then act the little plays. And she smiled. She said, as a teacher, you teach what you have, you teach to what you have before you. I think she was saying that the little 11, 12-year-old students of that time were products of their time. We had just become independent. We had just become a republic. And we lived in a world that was transitioning from plantation to nation. And we were part of that transition. And so we were given heavy load to fetch. It was then that we became West Indian. I remember one of the short stories by Edward Camo Brathwaite, a Barbadian who lived in Jamaica and was married to a Guyanese wife. He's a quintessential Caribbean man. And he wrote about cricket. He wrote about West Indies versus England and collapse, and he said, when the team was in trouble, There was not a man to hold it up, and that left a mark on our minds. And so as one thinks about emancipation, one thinks about education. My teachers, some of them went on to university and became PhDs. Most of them stayed in the teaching profession and labored in the vineyard. Labored. They couldn't go on to university. Had they done that, many of us would have been left by the wayside. We went on to universities. And so we lived out the dreams of our teachers, and they prepared us. And that is why everywhere I go, every time I open my mouth to speak on anything, I remember my teachers. They are part of the emancipation that we celebrate. If you are in touch with your teachers, you have their phone numbers, give one of them a call tomorrow and say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because that's part of what emancipation was about, preparing new soldiers. By the time they were finished with us in secondary school, we were ready for the world. Ready for the world. Today, when I write or when I speak, I know that I'm not speaking for me. I know that I'm speaking and writing not because of some superior skill that I possess, but because somebody, a set of people, men and women, mostly African, but there were some Indian teachers, my fourth standard common entrance teacher, there were two of them. Clyde Rupchan, who is now dead. Favour Comash, a Portuguese teacher. There were two fourth standard class, and I was in Rupchan class. The Rupchans were a Buxton family. His father was a goldsmith. I think he has a daughter now who is a permanent secretary. Different ethnic groups, but you felt as though they were your parents. My aunt was raising us because my mother had migrated. She couldn't help me with homework. She did everything else to make sure that we went to school. And so we couldn't depend when we go home, Auntie gonna help you with homework. She said, are you taking everything at school? And we had homework, we had to plug our way through. So it meant that we had to take in everything from school. And the typical family in the villages were like that. I went to Winston Jordan's office at the Ministry of Finance during the APNU government for something. And as I sat there, Rupchan walked in. By then he had, gone on and he was the person who wrote budgets under the PPP, and when the coalition came to office. And as I was sitting in Winston Jordan's office, he walked in. And he said, Winston, me teaches by a school, He teaches by a school. And just by the since then, he would have turned out so. turn out in politics. I think Mr. Jordan said, well, I didn't know that. He said, well, you know now. We teach this by. And when he left the room, Winston told me something that made me go back into the office. He tell me, the office at the back. And as I entered Mr. Rupchand's office, he said, me know where you come from. And he turned to his assistant and gave him some instructions. And he said, when me dead, I want you to continue this instruction. He told me before I left that he was not well. And although he didn't say he was going to die soon, I gathered as much. I think he died within a year after that visit. But he had left instructions with his assistant what to do in relation to my visit to his office. I like to tell those stories here because many times we think that we made it on our own. We are products of communities. And the link that I'm making here tonight is between the creation of villages, the creation of communities, and the responsibility of the communities to raise its children. Raise its children. Some of us may have had more opportunities than others, but all of us got opportunities, not because a government give us opportunities, government played their role, but because the community prepared us for the opportunities when they came. The story of emancipation is a story of community. It is no accident that most of the teachers in Guyana, most of the teachers in the teaching profession, most of those in the teaching profession, they're Africans and they're women. It is not that Africans were born to teach or women were born to teach. Because the teachers were the molders and still are. The molders of the community, carrying the community on their backs, earning very little. So they were not doing it to get rich. They were doing it to enrich their communities. You see, when we were at school and we did English and literature and history and geography, they said we were in the arts stream. We were doing arts, the arts subject. Later when I went on to university, I learned that they call them the humanities. It was through those subjects that one developed a sense of humanity. You went on to appreciate music and dance and painting and poetry and prose, what they call the fine arts. And you learn tools. You learn tools. I think it must have been about 20 years ago, Eddie Green, the former chancellor of the university, Professor Eddie Green, he worked at CARICOM for a little while and he I'd known him from Washington, D.C., when he was at the World Bank, I think, or the IDB, one of those institutions. And I got to know him there. So he saw me somewhere one day. He said, David, why you don't think about creating some courses at your university, linking politics and education, or politics and culture, or politics and communication, because you're very passionate about culture. And although you are a political scientist, find a way to merge the two. And that inspired me to create a course on Bob Marley. I went on to create courses studying reggae, calypso, and hip hop, linking the politics, what I call music as political discourse. Eddie Green planted that seed in my head. I'm saying that to say no man is an island, and certainly none of us Caribbean people can say individually we are islands. What we create and what we become are the products of the intervention of many people. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. What a dramatic day it was today. What a dramatic day it was today. The people of Linden, I think thousands of them were on the streets. You see, I go back to the humanities. What I've learned from reading books and studying the great thinkers is that I've come to appreciate the unpredictable nature of the human spirit. One of the things I learned is that you can never order people. You can never tell what tomorrow will bring. So many of us, understandably so, have asked, what is wrong with Guyanese people? What is wrong with Black people? Why a government which makes no pretense about its intention, its preparedness to beat people into submission? What is wrong with Guyanese? I've heard people say that when they brought us here as enslaved people, they send the weakest and mildest people to Guyana. Why are Guyanese taking this nonsense? Why are Africans taking this nonsense? And then one Saturday night, a ship sank. And quietly, gradually, people became incensed. Only last year, that little girl was killed, murdered in that hotel at Tushen, and people became enraged. All over Guyana, all over the diaspora. Yes, it was mostly people of African descent. But you could feel the vibrations of their rage, whether you were Indian, Amerindian, Chinese, or Portuguese. And so today, in Linden, people came onto the streets because the insensitivity, perhaps the bravado, perhaps the contempt of the PPP government. Jack Dio probably thought that he's invincible. I can go anywhere, anytime, do anything, anytime. Chose this time to go into Linden to hold an outreach. Not go to Linden to talk about the tragedy, but to hold an outreach. The governments must hold outreaches. But you are going into a territory that was not your natural political territory. But I think it's the kind of contempt that the government has for people, that it would dare in this season of outrage. Well, a few thousand people greeted Mr. Chatio today. I think they broke down the barriers and went into Watuka place there and demanded to meet with him. I tried to follow as much as I could follow on social media. We saw glimpses of Linden. Saw glimpses of Linden. Righteous indignation. Righteous indignation. We have a long, long way to go to regain our God-given right to say no, our God-given right to protest, our civil right, our constitutional right, our human right to resist oppression. We saw glimpses of that. It's a long way to go. It's a hard road to travel. But today was better than yesterday. This week was better than last week in that regard. I wished it were different. I wished I didn't see a three-way street. Some Africans dressed in red, some looking blue, and some looking green. And they were cussing each other. The blue and the green, they were cussing the reds. It was not a pretty sight. That's not what emancipation meant and means. But there were Africans who were prepared to allow themselves to be used as props. No other than a former minister under the coalition government, standing up and praising the PPP. Now, I don't mind people praising the PPP if they deserve praise. I don't care who you are. If the PPP deserves praise, I am not going to deny people that right to praise the PPP. But give them everything that the PPP has done to Africans, to the people of Linden, Region 10. Give them the backdrop of the present tragedy. An African-American, African Guyanese, former minister, all of that could allow ourselves to be taped, singing praises to the PPP. And I saw so many other African women being paraded by the Guyana Chronicle. I paid keen attention to what they were saying today. The Guyana Chronicle, social media website, Facebook page, parading African after African, singing the praises of the PPP. I am very careful because I don't want to deny individuals their right to admire and join any party that they wish to. That's their right. But you must be conscious when you are being used to con other people. At a time when people are saying, Edgell must go. I don't think it's merely that Edgell must demit office. I think pregnant in that cry that Edgell and Indar must go, but Edgell more, is really people's disgust that Mr. Edgell will face the camera as the voice and the face of this tragedy. I think that's the rage you're hearing when they say Edgell must go. I'm taking the license here to interpret people's action. Because often, I can't remember who was whether it was Clive Lloyd. I once interviewed Clive Lloyd, 1999, way back. I met him in Antigua, and I can't remember if it was him or Conrad Hunt or Wes Hall. But one of them told me that when you're out there playing sport, you do not wake up in the morning and say, I'm going out there and I'm performing a political act. But when you get out there and you see the crowd in the stands and you watch their faces and you hear the music and you watch them dance and prance and you watch their faces when you disappoint them, it is then that you realize what C.L.R. James said, is that you're engaged in more than just the sport. You're engaged in combat. You're engaged in representation. You're engaged in resistance. And so, you're an African. You have to be blind not to realize that the majority of Africans resent the PPP. They resent the PPP. And yes, you're a member of the PPP. But you don't disregard that resentment of your own people. I came up as a child in the 1970s. I know the PPP had African people, and the PPP was in government at that time. Clinton Collymore and Cyril Belgrave and Harold Snag. Shirley, her last name is escaping me, and she's my friend, I shouldn't. Shirley Edwards. So Rohi. But these were not black people who were in your faces. I think they were aware that they were a tiny minority of the African race. And they didn't taunt African people. But what I find with this generation of black people in the PPP, they are more big ass. They're more arrogant than the Indian members of the PPP. They care not about the feelings of their own people. And there is a way in which you can be PPP, but care about the feelings of your neighbors and your families and your neighbors. These people, men and women, it's as if they're taking the little power that they get from the PPP and flinging it in our faces. That is what the arrogance. I listen to them. Some of the younger ones, I won't even call their names, because when I call names here, they think that I'm referring to them personally. So I won't call names. But some of the younger ones say and do the most distasteful things. You hear some of them speak, and they make sense for 2 minutes. And by the time they get to the 3rd minute, it's like some bad spirit pulls them in line. And they lose their sense of balance and their sense of reason. So when I saw that Madam Minister today, I said, are you not aware of what your neighbors and your family and your brothers and your sisters in Linden, are you not aware of their feelings about what this government has done to them and people like them? Obviously not. I don't mind people joining the PPP if they want to. Whatever they want to join the PPP for. But don't take the filth in the PPP and throw it in the faces of your own people. You have to go back to those streets and those homes to sleep tonight. You're not going to Pradoville. You're not going to Babujan. You're not going to Enmore. You're going right back there in Linden. And you, just in the name of membership of a political party, throwing filth in the faces of your own people. I saw some of that today. If some black people choose to follow Muhammad, and PPP people have a problem with Muhammad, cuss Muhammad. But the way in which black people were cursing each other today. Some of them were Muhammad people. Some of them were PPP people cursing one another. Black people cursing black people under the banner of two leaderships that can hardly be called their own leadership. It tainted the protest today. Tainted the protest. Tainted the protest. The PNU was there, Aubrey Norton and others were there. And I was glad that their people were not front and center of the cussing down. What's our price? What is our price? It's obvious that we do have a price. And they're all aware that we do have a price, and they're prepared to pay that price. They're prepared to pay that price. But today was better than yesterday. Today was better than yesterday, and tomorrow must be better than today. It pains to see our people being used and abused and allowing themselves to be used and abused in the name of the political party. We are more than that. We are more than that. Yes, today was better than yesterday. Our people took a stand in Linden. One multiplied by 3 is still 3, but 3 parts. Last night we talked about the curse of disunity. We are never going to get party unity. I don't think the PPP, the PNC/APNU, and WIN will ever unite on anything. I hear some good people say that natural tragedy should bring us together. But slavery was the most heinous of national tragedies. And it hasn't brought us together. Why are we dreaming that the capsizing of MV Barima will bring us together? I have to be frank. The unity that we are talking about at the political level is not going to happen. But gun gonna fall. We are not historical enemies because Indian people didn't enslave African people and vice versa. We didn't enslave Amerindian people and vice versa. So we are not natural enemies. But given the way in which our history is played out, we have become political enemies. I hear some of the shallow analysts talk about, walk on the road, and black people say, hey man, you do good. And of course, that is natural. We live in the same country. Indian people will hail you up and African people will hail you up. Indian people hail me up. Indian people don't meet me on the road and cuss me. They cuss me on social media, bad. But I think some of those people on social media who cuss me, they see me in person. Yeah, David, come, let me take a selfie. That is only part of our story. Some people take that and make that the story. David, I'm living in the past. In the past, they used to do that. Look at what they're doing at Linden today. All that some of us are doing is acknowledging the reality of our condition. I think it's David Rudder say, how we vote is not how we party. The PPP and PNC and WIN and the other parties, there's no coming together. Not tragedy will bring us together. Say ta-ta to that. Certainly not no. Right now we are in competition for commonwealth. Not the Commonwealth, but commonwealth as in wealth that we are getting from oil and gas. We're in competition for that. And that competition is not going to spur us together. It's going to rip us apart. But even the ripping apart, we have to make sure that we don't rip apart the community. And that is exactly what I saw today. I saw today the heights of protest, but I saw the depths of ripping apart, the depth of disunity. I have to be frank. I have to be frank. The heights of protest, but the low of disunity. African cussing African. And it looks as though at some point they will fight African fighting African in a majority African tongue. We have to work this through. I suppose those who are mouthing off with the PPP, I don't think they mind what they saw. I think the PPP likes that. They like to see African people disunited. It makes their work easier. It means that we are not going to attack them with full force. They like that. They like what they see. They didn't like the protests. But I like the protests divided in three. Because when you are divided as a community, somebody said, well, Dr. Hines, who are you talking? If they're divided as party, then it doesn't follow that they divide as community. And I said, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be like that. I born, grew up, live in a village that we used to be divided by party. Some Buxtonians were WPA, some were PNC, some were both WPA and PNC. We were divided as party, but I don't think we were divided as community. I don't think that the PNC chaps, we ever stopped talking. We make fun now. The PNC boys would say, you know, they plan their thing and they put up post up on all the lantern posts in Buxton. They finish their work at 1 o'clock and they gone home. And by the time 6 o'clock in the morning, all the poster come down from the lantern post, them WPA by don't take them down. We make fun of it today. One of my very good friends, one of my best friends today, we used to call him the PNC marksman in the village. I once wrote in a poster that he was the most dangerous man in Buxton. Today we are friends. We never stopped being friends, although we were politically not in the same party. So it is possible to be divided along party lines and not divide the community. At Emancipation Day, we were all together, eating conky, drinking swank, and dancing to the drums, and so on and so forth. But today, and like we see at Linden today, those people, they're from the same community, but they're translating their partisan thing into an enemy thing. And that doesn't spell well for Black people. Because when the parties ring their bell, we are going to be answering to three masters. So yesterday was a good day for protest in Linden. A better day than yesterday. So better day than yesterday. But we have to observe the downsides of what we see. We can't make it into what we want it to be. We can merely observe, and that's what I'm doing. I'm making an observation. The PPP is destroying Black people. And some Black people are helping in that destruction. One cannot deny that Brother Mohammed is a fixture. But you're not going to see Jack Dio doing an outreach in Enterprise or Port Morant. And Brother Mohammed ain't going there and break down no rails. Brother Mohammed not going there and break down no rails in Enterprise and Babu Jan. And then more Port Morant. We're watching the ride. Tomorrow is another day. And we're watching. And we're trying to make sense of where we are and where we're going. What we do know is that there is almost universal dislike and disgust. Dislike for and disgust of the PPP. If they didn't know it, they better know it today. It was insensitive of Barrett to decide to go to Linden today. They either misread the mood of the people, or they don't care. And I think it's both. I think it's more they don't care. But I think there's also misreading because they figured that they beat up black people too much. Black people aren't coming out on no road to protest anything. A couple of them gonna come out and so on, but you're getting 1,000 of them to come out.